Welcome, welcome, welcome. Hello, everybody, and welcome to you. My name is Dawn Sanders, and I am the founder and CEO of Noah's Ark Agape Life Center. And I bring you greetings from on high. I want to start by saying thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for showing up. Thank you for being present. Whether you're here because you're curious, because you're trying to grow, or because you know that you need to stay relevant in today's world, I want to let you know that you are in the right place at the right time. This is the first of many sessions in our JUMP Workforce Acceleration Program. JUMP stands for Jumpstart Unemployed and Underemployed Minorities into Position. This is not just a program. This is a movement to close gaps, build skills, and position people for real opportunities. Today, we are starting with our AI Foundations course. Now, let me say this clearly. Artificial intelligence is not the future. It is already here. It is shaping how companies hire, how work gets done, and how decisions are made every single day. But here is the problem. A lot of people are being left out, not because they're not capable, but because they are not, or they have not been given access, exposure, or simple, clear understanding. That's what we're going to change. And in this course, I'm going to break down AI in a way that makes sense. No confusion, no intimidation, just real understanding. You're going to learn what AI is, how it works, where it shows up in your everyday life, and most importantly, how you can start using it as a tool. Because at the end of the day, AI is not here to replace you. It is here to amplify those who know how to use it. And that is going to be you. So as we go through the session, I want you to stay open, stay engaged, and most importantly, see yourself in this space. You belong here. You are capable of learning this, and you can use this to shift your future. All right, let's get started. This is one of my absolute favorite topics, and I love speaking on it. And I'm hoping that you enjoy it, but more importantly, I'm hoping that you decide to join us on our upcoming cohort that will start very soon, and you'll have an opportunity to register. But this foundational course is intended to give you an idea of the types of trainings that you will get as you come through our JUMP program. Now, many of the trainings I will not be teaching. And through this accelerated course or cohort, what's going to happen is most of the training will be done through our training vendor. And then we will have on-site sessions that will support that training. Okay. So, but anyway, I'm not going to get into that. You'll have enough time to learn more about that. But today, I wanted to do this training. One, again, because this is something that I love to talk about. I am very much vested in the enhancement of our community in this area. I don't want us left behind. So let us get started, because if I could go, I will go on and on and on. Okay, but I've got some materials to review today. So let me start here. This is called AI Foundations for Workforce Readiness. But before I get started, I want to level set your understanding of what this is, okay? Because I want to let you know before we go any further that this is not a class about learning a tool. It's not about playing around with ChatGPT, even though we're going to do some prompting towards the end. And it's definitely not about the hype. Okay, it's about understanding a system. And I want you to understand AI as a system. And it's important and imperative that you do that because today AI is shaping almost everything that we encounter. It's shaping who gets hired, who gets seen, who gets funded, and what's most important to me is shaping who gets left behind. Now, here's the part that most people get wrong, and this is where I wanted to start out the seminar in expressing that a lot of people think that AI got started overnight. But AI did not start overnight. As a matter of fact, I understand why you feel that way because in the last few years, it showed up on our phones, it showed up on our job, in our business, and on social media in a more prominent way. But what you're seeing now, what we see today, is not the beginning. It's actually the result. So I wanted to take the time in this course to kind of walk you through some of the history, okay? So back in the 1940s and 50s, we had our first programmable computers. And these were room-size computers, right? They didn't have screens like we have today. They didn't have the internet. This was just simply raw computing. Similar to what you saw in that scene, I can't remember the name of this movie with Taraji P. and the women, the African-American women who were a part of NASA, right? Lord, I can't remember it. But anyway, that's how the machines looked. They were these huge, bulky machines, and all they did was these raw computations. And so a few intellectuals began thinking and asking the questions, can machines do more than just calculate? They also wanted to know if machines could imitate intelligence. And so there was this annual conference. It's called the Dartmouth Conference. And a lot of these engineers, IT intellectuals, brilliant thinkers would come to this annually. And back in 1956, they coined artificial intelligence and AI as an area or a field of study. And so this becomes important because this became the catalyst for people trying to fund this, because once you name it, what do? You fund it, you research it, and you build around it. Now, here's where it gets real. They thought they were closer than they actually were to realizing AI as they envisioned it. So it wasn't that they didn't have sound ideals around the capabilities and the innovation of AI. It was that they were not able to achieve it because while they had the vision, there was no environment. So there was not enough computing power, there was not enough data, there was not enough storage. And so this is important because the lessons that they learned then, we are facing today, right? So in the 1970s and 80s, progress began to slow down. And so when progress slows, what happens? Funding drops, interest begins to fade. And this is the period that they call the AI winter. It wasn't that they didn't try, because they tried it. It just didn't work the way that they thought. So people began to back away. That matters because what you're seeing today is not the first wave of excitement. It's just the first time that this ideal is actually being able to work at scale. Let's bring it closer to something you may recognize. Think about the early days of the internet. Some of you remember when people said things like, I created the internet, or they said, this is the future. And a lot of people didn't believe it. There were debates. It was a lot of hype, confusion, and exaggeration. And I won't go into all of that, but you all remember your boy Al Gore when he said he invented the internet. And in actuality, I personally believe that he was very instrumental in the development of the internet, while he may not have invented it. But we're learning today, and a lot of intelligence, that innovation and technology oftentimes begins in our armed forces and maybe sometimes in our government. So I do believe that he was instrumental. Now, Al Gore, you may not have invented it, but you did contribute. So whether people agreed or disagreed about what the internet was capable of doing, what it shows is when something is new, people don't fully understand it. And then narratives begin to form around it. That's the same thing that we're seeing today. We're seeing that happening right now around AI. But here's the difference. The internet didn't become powerful overnight either, but from the 1990s into the 2000s, something changed. And that something was people got online, businesses went digital, every search, every click, every purchase, every message became data. And this is where I want you to lean in and really understand, because AI runs on data. So what actually happened? While you were browsing the internet, while you were on your social media, while you were shopping online, you were generating the fuel that AI truly needed, okay? So in actuality, you were not just using a system, you were training it. Now here's where everything comes together. By the 2010s, three things finally aligned. And this is key. There was more data than ever before, more computing power than ever before. There were better algorithms than ever before. And that's the moment AI stopped being theory and it started becoming real. So that was the difference between AI and the internet. So what feels like a sudden explosion is actually decades of buildup finally becoming visible. Let me give you a few ways to look about this so that it sticks. AI is like a tree. And people think just because the fruit appeared, that tree began to form overnight. But the roots were growing underground for decades. Here's another analogy. AI is like a skyscraper. The blueprint existed early, but the materials and engineering had to catch up before it could be built. But what about for you cooks out there? AI is like cooking. They had the recipe a long time ago. They just didn't have enough ingredients. They didn't have enough heat or a big enough kitchen to make it work. And now we do. So what you're seeing today is not magic. It's timing, it's scale, it's alignment. And most importantly, it is a system. So remember, as we continue through this study, it is a system. And so as we move forward, I don't want you thinking about, I missed this. I want you thinking, I'm stepping into this at a moment it became usable. And that's a completely different place to be in. I want you to understand that you were a contributor. Now, like Al Gore, you didn't invent AI, but you were a contributor to the data that fuels AI. All right? So now that we understand AI didn't start overnight, the next question is, where did it actually begin? And what were they really trying to? All right, y'all. So now that we understand that AI didn't just show up yesterday, let's talk about what it actually is. Because this is where a lot of people get lost and they get hung up because they think that AI is actually thinking. They think that it's learning like an actual human or it's becoming conscious. Trust me, AI lacks the ability to think. The only being that has that ability is those that God created. So we have the ability to think critically and creatively, and AI does not. What's actually happening is, and I'll break it down for you so that it actually makes sense. AI is a system, and that system is looking at data, it's identifying patterns, and it's predicting what is the most likely to come next. That's it. That's all it's doing. It's not thinking, it's not aware, it's not understanding truth. It's predicting based on patterns. So look at it like this. If I gave you thousands of examples of resumes, okay? And then I asked you to write one, you're going to start to recognize those patterns. And what you notice is how they start, how they're structured, and what words are used. And you're going to take that to be able to build a resume or complete that task. Well, AI is doing the exact same thing. But instead of seeing hundreds or thousands of examples, it sees millions and sometimes even billions. So when you type something into AI, you're not asking it to think. You're actually asking it to predict the best possible response based on everything that it's seen before. That's why it sounds so smart, because it's seen enough patterns to respond in a way that actually feels intelligent. Okay? All right, so it's imperative that I clear this up early so you don't get confused later as we continue to build on the information that we're learning today. As I mentioned before, AI does not think, okay? It does not think. It does not understand what is true. It does not know what is right or wrong, and it does not have judgment, okay? It produces what is most probable. So sometimes it sounds very confident, okay? And it can be completely wrong because it's making predictions. That's what people call hallucinations. And let me say this clearly, AI is not lying. It's guessing based on patterns. And sometimes the pattern is wrong. This is important because if you don't understand this, you'll trust it too much or you'll fear it too much. And we don't want to do either. We're learning how to actually use it. So just understand again, AI, it simply does not think. It cannot understand truth. It does not know right from wrong. And it does not have real world experiences. Okay? It's not an alien. It's not a demon. It's not a human. It is a system that has the ability to make good predictions based on patterns, based on data from many, many, many data points, okay? All right, now, here's how it works. Here's the full flow. Step one, you give it input. You ask a question, make a request, or you give it a prompt. Step two, the system processes that input. It compares what you type to patterns it has seen before. Not one answer, millions of possible patterns. Step three, it generates an output. It predicts what response is most likely to make sense. So when you use something like ChatGPT, you're not retrieving information like you would, say, if you do a search on Google. You're generating a response, and that's a big difference. Google finds, AI creates. So now I know you're wondering, why does AI feel so real? But it's really not what you think. It may feel real, but it's not real. And this is where people get caught. AI feels real. It responds fast. It sounds natural. It keeps up with context. So your brain says, this thing understands me. But what's really happening is it has seen enough language patterns to simulate understanding. Let me give you an analogy. AI is like an actor, right? A great actor can cry, they can laugh, they can argue, or even persuade, but they are playing a role. AI is performing intelligence, not becoming it. And once you understand that, you stop being impressed and you start becoming strategic. So, what was the real shift? And why is AI working now as opposed to before? It's not new ideals, it's just that the right environment finally existed. Now, let's connect back to what we talked about earlier without really repeating it. But AI did not suddenly become intelligent. Okay. The environment finally caught up. Three things came together. One, data was more than ever before. Two, compute time was faster than ever before. Three, algorithms became better than ever before. And that combination changed everything. So this is not a new ideal. It's an old ideal that finally works at scale. So now you understand something that most people don't. AI is not magic. AI is not thinking. AI is pattern recognition at scale. And once you understand that, you stop being intimidated by it and you start learning how to direct it. Now that we understand what AI is, the next question is, who built these systems and how did they gain the power to scale them? Let's discuss. All right, so let's talk about the data reality, right? And how we actually train the system. Because the truth of the matter is, AI didn't learn in a vacuum, it learned from human behavior at scale. That means billions of users, trillions of interactions, decades of digital behavior. AI didn't just wake up and become intelligent, it was trained, but not in a lab like the way that people may think. It was trained through scale. There were billions of people, trillions of interactions over decades. Every digital interaction became part of the data set. Not one person, not one company, but human behavior at a scale. Let's break it down to your daily life. When you search Google, you're not just getting results, you're signaling what you're curious about, what you're trying to solve, and what you're interested in. When you use Gmail, you're teaching systems. You're teaching them how people communicate, how conversations flow, how language is structured. When you shop on Amazon, you're actually showing how people decide what influences purchases, what patterns lead to buying. When you use GPS, you're mapping behaviors. You're telling the system where people go, when they go, how they move. None of this feels like AI, but all of it feeds AI. So what about the free models, the free everything that we started getting? Free email, free search, free social media, free apps. Now let's talk about the model behind all of this. None of this was just random. Company offered us tools for free because they wanted to be able to acquire the data that they needed in order to fuel the AI system. Think about the cloud. Think about all of the files that we are uploading. We're giving information. I remember one of my first corporate jobs, my manager would always advise me whenever creating a multi-factor authentication, which back in the day, it was manual and now today it's digital. But he would always say, don't ever give your mother's maiden name or any data points about your father because they're collecting information. And I didn't understand it back then, but I understand it now. So companies offered us powerful tools for free email, free search, free social media. And the question is why? Why? Because your data has value. So the model became, you use the platform, your behavior is captured, that data is analyzed, ads are triggered or targeted, revenue is generated, and systems improve. Okay? And then that cycle repeats. So here's the part people miss. The same data systems that power ads also became the foundation for AI. So in essence, you trained the predictive systems before AI was popular. Before ChatGPT, you were already interacting with AI. Autocomplete finishing your sentences, predictive text on your phone, recommended videos on YouTube, suggested products on Amazon. That's all AI. Not the same form that we see today, but the same concept, pattern recognition plus prediction. So this is not new behavior. It's an evolution of something you've already been using. And so in essence, you help teach AI how to think like you. AI sounds human because it learned from humans. It learned from how we write, how we argue, explain, joke, sell, teach. Every blog post, every forum conversation, every email thread became training material. That's why it feels familiar. It's not inventing something new, it's reflecting us back at scale. So you're not just a user, you're part of how the system was built. Now let me help this land, okay? I want you to understand that each of us, we're not just users of AI. We're a part of how it was built. So in essence, we may be co-parents, co-founders, co-creators of AI. Without human behavior at scale, it would never exist. Instead of thinking I'm not a part of this, or I'm afraid of this, or AI is going to take over my job, or AI is going to do. No. I want you to know and understand that you have been a part of this creation since the beginning of its evolution. And with that being so, it can never conquer you. But if you learn how to use it appropriately, then it will be very beneficial. I leverage AI as a thought partner, and I refuse to be shamed about using a system that was created to bridge the gap and the lack of information share, knowledge share in our communities. AI is a very resourceful tool that we can use. Some people may call it surveillance capitalism, others may call it data economy, and some may even call it innovation. Different names, same reality. At the end of the day, it's human behavior, and human behavior becomes fuel for AI systems. All right, so let's pick up where we left off. But before we do that, I just want to do a little recap, right? A recap of what we've learned so far. And so we started out, the goal was to kind of level set some of the things that we think about AI and establish or set the tone for what AI really is, right? AI is a system, right? And within that system, there are capabilities. So it's not just a tool. We also learned that AI establishes stakes in jobs and access and in opportunity. We took a look at what AI really is, right? That AI in essence is really just data plus patterns and predictions. And AI performs pattern recognition at scale. We also learned what AI is not. And AI is not thinking, is not aware of truth. And we also learned that AI can be confidently wrong, which is what we call hallucinations. Then we went on to look at how does AI actually work. And in essence, it's just really input, and it takes that input and it processes it into output. And one critical fact that we learned is that AI is a prediction machine. It's not a knowledge machine, and that's important. We looked at why it feels real, and mainly because it's fast and fluent and contextual. AI is performing intelligence, just like actors. It's performing intelligence, it's not becoming it. And so we assess, why is AI working today in 2026 better or unlike it did back in the 50s and 60s? And we learned because there's more data entered into the ecosystem of the AI system. Data explosion, increased compute power, and the improvement and enhancements of algorithms. And so in our last segment, we looked at the data reality. And the fact of the matter is that you and I and those like us, we actually trained the system. AI didn't learn in a vacuum. There were billions of users, trillions of interactions. And we all left a digital trail through our Google searches, through our email, through our social media, our shopping behaviors, our GPS data, and all of the other things that we were feeding into this system to fuel it. Many of you, like we took advantage of these free models that were given to us through these corporations and companies. And they were tools, they were free, but they were free in exchange for our data. And this data created ads, it generated revenue, and eventually it was the fuel that fueled AI in the system that we see today. There were predictive systems even before the AI that we experience today through autocomplete. There were recommendations, if you recall, from what music you should listen to what videos you should review. There was a lot of suggestive content. And AI took our responses and our interactions, and it learned how to reflect human patterns through our emails, through our blogs, through our conversations. And so the ultimate takeaway from the last segment was that we are co-creators of AI. We're not just users, we're contributors to this entire system. And so now we're going to shift a little bit and talk about the network behind AI. We're going to explore the power and the capital and the influence. And I'm looking forward to this segment because this is an area that I really enjoy. I'm very intrigued about how this all came to be and the people and the players. I guess I like it because it makes it somewhat relatable to understand the human contribution to this massive expansion of intelligence and data that we use today. So in this segment, we're going to talk about the network behind the machine. And in this section, it's not about saying, here are some tech people. This section is about showing that AI did not appear out of thin air. It came through networks. It came through universities, through money, through mergers. It came through exits, through venture capital. And the important part is that it came through personal relationships. They had power struggles. It came through lawsuits, boardrooms, government relationships, and infrastructure. And the biggest lesson here is that AI is not just a tool. AI is the product of a power network. And that network has roots. It has people. It has patterns. It has winners. It's got gatekeepers. And if we don't understand the system behind the machine, we won't be able to leverage it to its optimal capabilities. And we'll only understand it on the surface. So now, before we can talk about ChatGPT, before we can talk about OpenAI or Microsoft, before we can even talk about my buddy Elon Musk or Sam Altman, Peter Thiel, or any of these other names that keep showing up on the news or in social media, we need to go back. We need to go back because technology doesn't just come from code. Technology comes from people. And people come from networks. And networks usually begin long before the public sees the product. So this story that we're going to talk about today, it doesn't really begin with artificial intelligence or even with PayPal. It begins in a place like Stanford University. And Stanford matters because Stanford is not just a school. It is, and it was, one of the cultural engines of Silicon Valley. It's a talent pipeline, a relationship factory. It was a place where future founders and investors, engineers, lawyers, doctors, political thinkers, and public intellectuals could meet each other, even before the titles, before the companies, before the fame, and before the billions. And that's important because when people are young, they're not just learning information, they're learning who they can trust, they're learning who thinks like them, they're learning who is bold enough to challenge the room, and they're learning who can argue, who can build, who can take the pressure, and who might be useful to them later or in the future. In 1987, Peter Thiel and Norman Book founded the Stanford Review. This was a student-run publication at Stanford University, and on paper, it was a student newspaper. But culturally, it became more than that. It became a gathering point for people who were opinionated, contrarian, ambitious, and willing to challenge what they saw as the dominant culture around them. The Stanford Review identifies Thiel and Book as their founder, and Public Reportings has described the paper as part of the early relationship network that later connected into Silicon Valley influence. Now, here's where we need to slow down so that we can really see it. Because a student newspaper on the surface doesn't sound very powerful, but relationships are powerful. A campus publication doesn't sound like infrastructure, but networks are infrastructure. So before somebody controls a company, they often belong to a circle. Before they can write a check, they often know who they can trust. And before somebody funds a founder, they often know how the founder thinks. This is why it matters. The future often starts small. It starts in a student publication. It starts in a debate. It starts in a dorm room. It starts with people saying, we don't see the world the way everybody else sees it. And whether you agree with them or not, that kind of shared conviction is powerful. So when we talk about AI today, we can't just ask, what does the tool do? We have to actually ask, who built the world that allowed the tool to exist? And that takes us back to Stanford University. So now the story moves from campus culture to startup combat. You see, X.com and Confinity were competitors. And that competition created a merger. Yet that merger was created under pressure and conflict and eventually a power network. And I want to be clear that what they created wasn't born out of one big happy family. It wasn't this cute little group project where everybody came in humble and sweet and emotionally regulated. No, this is where Silicon Valley warfare originated. On one side, you had Confinity, associated with Peter Thiel, Max Levchin, and Luke Nosek. And Confinity was focused on payments, cryptography, and digital money. And on the other side, you had Elon Musk, X.com. And he was moving into online financial services, and they were rivals. They were fighting for the same future. And then they merged. Many coined that merger of the PayPal story as the merger of enemies. And the reason they named it that is because it captured the actual energy of what was happening and what happened. there were people with competing ideals, competing egos, competing visions, competing instincts, and suddenly they had to figure out how to survive inside of the same company because they developed a desire to reach a goal that was bigger than all of them. A lot of companies will try to clean up the story about their business origins after the fact. They want to make it sound like they were smooth, but here, with these individuals, they're very transparent. I wouldn't go as far as to say that they did not like each other, but their egos were so large that they were not able to appropriately respect each other, but they got the job done. So eventually the company merged, then they grew, and then eBay bought them. So they came together, Confinity and X.com, and they merged together. Then they grew, and then eBay bought them. But inside the story, it was messy. They had a lot of product fights, leadership tension, fraud issues, market pressure, strategic disagreements, internal conflict. But there was something very powerful happening in the midst of all of that. These people were being forged. They were learning how to build under pressure. They were learning how to move fast. They were learning how to survive chaos. They were learning how to recognize talent. They were learning who, in essence, could handle war. And then in 2002, eBay brought PayPal for about $1.5 billion. $1.5 billion. Now, that sale wasn't just about a payday. It was a conversion moment. That acquisition converted startup employees into wealthy founders, into investors, into future power brokers. They walked out of PayPal with three things. They walked out with money, with credibility, and a network. And that combination is dangerous in the most strategic sense. Because if you have money but no credibility, people may never follow you. And if you have credibility but no money, you may still struggle to scale. If you have relationships but no capital, you may have influence but no execution power. But when you have all three, when you have money, when you have credibility and a network, now you can shape markets. And that is what PayPal created. It created a circle of people who had survived together, who fought together, who won together, who exited together, and then spread out across the internet economy. So PayPal was not just a payments company. PayPal became a launching pad. Now, this is where we get to the phrase people love, because it sounds so dramatic. It sounds cinematic. It sounds so, deep. The PayPal Mafia. Now, let me say this very carefully, because I know that I'm recording. We're not using this phrase to suggest anything criminal. This is the nickname people gave the group of former PayPal founders and employees who went on to build, to fund, and to shape major companies across Silicon Valley. And the reason that the nickname stuck is because the network was unusually powerful. And so we hear about the PayPal mafia, or recently, to date, they use the term tech bros. But this is former PayPal people who went on to build or influence companies like LinkedIn, Palantir, SpaceX, Affirm, YouTube, Yelp, Yammer, and Kiva. But the nickname is not the real lesson. The mechanism that they employ is the lesson. And the mechanism is this: build, exit, fund, repeat. Build, exit, fund, repeat. And let me break that down. Level one, they build a company. They build PayPal in a chaotic, competitive, high-pressure environment. Level two, the company exits. eBay buys PayPal. The exit gives people money and credibility. Level three, they move into the next wave. Some become founders again. Some become investors. Some join boards. Some start venture funds. Some enter politics. Some fund under other founders. Some build companies that touch government, defense, finance, media, transportation, and work. And so level four, the network compounds. And that means the power does not just grow in a straight line, it multiplies. Because each successful company creates more money, more relationships, more influence, more data, more talent, more access, and more data flow. This is how ecosystems are built. So Peter Thiel becomes connected to PayPal, Palantir, Founders Fund, and early Facebook investing. Elon Musk moves from X.com and PayPal into Tesla, SpaceX, XAI, Neuralink, and other ventures. Reid Hoffman moves through PayPal into LinkedIn, venture capital, Microsoft board influence, and later AI investment circles. Max Levchin moves from PayPal into Affirm, and David Sachs moves from PayPal into Yammer venture capital through Kraft Ventures, and later public policy influence around technology. Chad Hurley, Steve Chen, and Jared Karim moved from PayPal into YouTube. Jeremy Stoppelman and Russell Simmons are associated with Yelp, and Pramil Shah is associated with Kiva. Now look at the pattern. This is not one industry. This is professional identity, video media, local business reviews, consumer lending, government analytics, space infrastructure, workplace software, microfinance, venture capital, and eventually artificial intelligence. So when somebody says, why are we talking about PayPal in an AI course? This is why. Because the people who shape one generation of the internet also influence the money, the companies, the platforms, the policy environment that shape the next generation. AI didn't just come out of nowhere. It comes from the same river of capital, talent, ambition, and institutional power. They didn't just build companies. They shaped how people work, watch, buy, move, search, and decide. Now we need to make this more practical, because if I just give you names, you'll hear me like trivia, or you'll hear those names like trivia and not really retain it. But this isn't trivia, this is daily life. So let me try to walk you through it. LinkedIn changed professional identity. So before LinkedIn, a resume was a document. Your network was mostly offline. Your job search was more private. LinkedIn helped turn professional identity into a searchable, public, data-driven platform. And that changed recruiting. It changed networking. It changed how employers find talent. It changed how people perform professionalism online. And for me, I recall those early days in my corporate career where I would literally go to Kinko's or somewhere to print off my resume. And I would take my resume to different companies within the area. And I would go to the receptionist desk or whoever I could find, and I would hand them a copy of my resume on parchment paper or resume paper. Sometimes, if I could afford it and scrape up the money, I'd put it in a folder and go hand it to them physically and ask for an opportunity to interview. But LinkedIn changed all of that. And YouTube changed media distribution. Before YouTube, most people needed permission to reach mass audiences. You needed television, radio, publishing, or institutional access. But YouTube opened a door for creators, for educators, for churches, influencers, for journalists, entertainers, and everyday people. It allowed people to upload their videos and leverage their platform for others to review. It also changed attention. It changed culture. It changed politics. It changed how people learn and how people were radicalized. It changed what counted as expertise. I remember before YouTube, the advertisement or the media industry was very lucrative. And it was hard for you to gain access without money, without capital, influence, and access. And they were selective about who they allowed to do what. YouTube changed that. And Yelp changed local business reputation. Before platforms like Yelp, word of mouth was what we used. And it was local and very limited. After Yelp, reviews became public infrastructure. A restaurant, a barber, mechanic, dentist, or small business could be elevated or damaged by digital reputation. And then here comes a firm. A firm, now that changed consumer finance. It cultivated the buy now, pay later models, and it changed how people purchase. And that matters because financial technology doesn't just help people buy, it shapes consumer behavior. It shapes debt habits, affordability perceptions, and retail strategy. We went from layaway, you set it aside and you pay for it until you can afford to get it, to buy it now and struggle to pay and get in more debt. Now let's shift to Palantir. Palantir moved into data analysis, defense, intelligence, and government systems. And that's a different level of power. That's not just convenience technology, that's institutional technology. It touches how governments and agencies analyze data, how they make decisions, and identify patterns. And this is something that we're seeing today as we saw the battle between Anthropic and our government, and where they wanted to stand 10 toes down on their decision to ensure moral integrity when their technology is being leveraged. They wanted to ensure there was a human in the middle of decision making, and there was no autonomous ability to leverage their technology associated with weapons without a human in between. But anyway, maybe I'll do a lesson on that. But let's talk about SpaceX. SpaceX changed space and satellite infrastructure. And once you talk about satellites, you're no longer talking about rockets. You're talking about communications, about defense, about internet access, global coverage, and geopolitical leverage. These things are very integral in our society today, all from the building of the merger and the building of PayPal, the build up of the organization, the exit and the sale to eBay, the payout, and the development of this network and ecosystem that they developed. And so Yammer moved into workplace communications and was later sold to Microsoft. And the reason that that matters is because the workplace itself became social, searchable, trackable, and platform based. Now let us step back so that we can clearly see this. Because the network that was formed, that was developed, this network touched how people get hired, how people watch, how people borrow, how people review, how government analyze, how companies communicate, and how satellites connect. And that means that it's not just a story about wealth. It's a story about behavior and how technology shapes what people do without them even noticing it. And that truly matters. Okay, so in the next segment, we're going to talk about venture capital. Okay, we're going to talk about the money gate, the money that allows this network to continue to grow. All right, let's pick up where we left off. And I actually had to go back and re record this segment because the last one that I recorded actually had distortion. And for whatever reason, when I went back and listened to it after I uploaded it, I learned that the audio was somewhat off. So, because I wanted to make sure that you get the information, I wanted to go back and re-record. Okay, so this is my attempt and helping to earlier presentation where I talked about how AI does not think, right? And when I made that statement, I was using the term as we commonly understand it and as defined, let's say, through the Webster Dictionary or dictionary.com, right? So thinking or think is a verb, and it means to use your mind to process information, to form ideals, make decisions, or understand something. So, in essence, in order to think, you have to first have a mind. All right. So, the definition further explains that in simple terms, to think is to consider something, to reason through it, to form an opinion or conclusion, or or imagine or reflect. And so a few examples that it gives us to further clarify what thinking actually is one, I need to think about that decision. You are evaluating options. Or she thinks this will work. She formed an opinion. And the final example is think before you speak. Pause and process before acting. Okay. And so thinking is, I termed it or defined it as I made the declaration that AI does not think, involves recalling information, analyzing patterns, weighing possibilities, and or making meaning from what you know. Okay. So it can be solving a problem, logical thinking, creative thinking, generating ideas, reflective thinking and examining past experiences, or intuitive thinking, quick or experience-based judgment. Thinking is a human process of understanding and reasoning. So AI does not think, and it definitely doesn't think in this way. AI predicts patterns based on data, but it does not have awareness. It does not have understanding, nor does it have intent. So when people say AI is thinking, what they're really seeing is just a fast pattern prediction that looks like thinking. It is not thinking. AI does not have the ability to think. Okay. All right. So I'll stop there and get back to the topic at hand. But I wanted to clarify that for anyone who had any confusion, and so that we do some correct fact checks. Right. All right. So today, what I really wanted to talk about was venture capital. Right. The money behind the network, behind the machine. Right. The money gate. So I wanted to talk about how that funding and that network began to generate money into this ecosystem, I guess is what I'll term it as. Okay. So venture capital is not just funding, it's selection. In essence, it decides which ideals receive enough money to scale. So we talked earlier about the Founders Fund, which was co-founded by Theo Howery and Nosek, and it became one major vehicle through which this network funded later companies. Business and venture profiles widely identify Theo Howery and Nosek with Founders Fund and follow-on investment influence. So now we have to talk about the money. We got to talk about the money. So you understand, kind of what's going on behind the scenes, because ideals don't scale because they're good. Ideals scale because somebody is willing to fund them. And that is where venture capital comes in. Venture capital is not just money. It's permission, it's oxygen, it's access. See, if your ideal gets funded, you can hire, you can build, you can market, and you can survive long enough to become powerful. But if your ideal doesn't get funded, it may die in a notebook. And no matter how good it was, nobody would ever know the full potential of what it can accomplish. So when former founders became or become investors, they become gatekeepers of the next future. They're no longer asking the question, what should I build? They're deciding who gets to build. And that's very important. And so let's talk about OpenAI, the mission, the money, the breakup, and what happened during this time. This is where the drama started getting thick because it was about the money. It was about the power. And so now we move from research, now we move from a newspaper publication to a financial services organization to a merger of diverse perspectives, personalities, and egos, to the sale of this conglomerate company that they created, to the reinvestment into others. And now we have OpenAI in 2015 is when OpenAI was born, or at least when it was exposed to the world. And the original promise that they had, it sounded noble. They wanted to build artificial intelligence in a way that benefits humanity. Not just one company, not just one billionaire, and not just one government, humanity, the all of humanity. And that was their public mission. But behind every mission, there's also money. There's also government. There's control or governance, not government, but yes, government as well. But there's governance, there's control, there's ego, there's strategy. And here we go again with that ego coming in. And so the founding circle, as I understand, includes Sam Altman, Elon Musk, Greg Brockman, Ilya Sutskever, and I always say his name wrong, so I apologize, Sutskever, John Schuman, Andrij Karpathy, Roshachek Zaramba, and others were included in that initial circle. Support was also connected to people and organizations like Reid Hoffman, Peter Thiel, AWS, Infosys, and YC Research. So already it's not a little science project in their garage, right? This is elite capital, elite talent, elite networks, and a world-changing mission all sitting at the same table. And then comes the tension, because the question now becomes, who controls the mission? Who gets to decide what benefits humanity means? Who gets the power when the nonprofit needs billions of dollars and compute and compete? This is where their relationships began to crack. And so OpenAI eventually created a capped profit arm, and Microsoft, if you recall, becomes a major strategic partner. And so at this point, the models become products and the stakes become enormous. Elon Musk, one of the co-founders, later becomes one of OpenAI's loudest critics. He then goes on to launch XAI. He goes on to sue, which that litigation is currently active. And I believe as of April 28th, I think that's when the trials began for this suit. But he sues them and AI pushes back. They push back because they say, look, he's only suing us because he wanted to be the CEO. He was all good with the idea when he thought that he was going to be a prospect for controlling and running the for-profit arm of OpenAI. And so the dispute becomes public and legal and extremely personal, because if not to get into the gossip, but get a little bit into the gossip, but if you were following them at that time and even up until now, they started taking some not so nice jabs at each other. And it's not so much gossip in a fake sense, but it's governance drama, right? It's the same thing that we saw back in the PayPal days, right? It's an issue of mission versus money at this point. Founder against founder, or founder versus founder. And that's the moment when the question becomes, was AI built for humanity? Or did humanity become the slogan while power moved behind the curtain? See, one of our favorite movies, The Wiz, or Oz, or, The Wiz, not The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz. And we found out, that the man behind the machine was not, who we thought he was. And I think that that's what's happening as the layers began to be pulled back in AI. We're starting to see more what's behind the curtain. And the saddest part is they came under the guise of, we want to build artificial intelligence for the betterment of humanity. And now that all of this money needs to pass hands, we're starting to see their true colors. And I apologize, I had to take a ginger chew. I'm getting a little bit nauseous, but at the same time, I feel this cough coming on. All right, so now we've got Microsoft entering into the game, okay? And AI, in essence, becomes a product layer. When Microsoft enters the story, AI changes its actual category. It's no longer just research, it becomes infrastructure. It becomes a product. It becomes something that can be placed in Word, Excel, Teams, searches, cloud services, coding tools, and business workflows. And so that's actually a major shift, because whoever controls the software, or the software people already use, has a direct path into the workplace. Because if you're controlling that software that we're already using every day, then now you become a powerful player. And that's why this particular topic and this approach matters for workforce readiness. Because AI didn't show up as a separate app, it became embedded in the tools that people already depend on. And the reason that this is important is because I hear this all the time when people say, I'm not going to use AI, AI is evil, all of these other things that people say, but you're going to use it because it's embedded in everything that we do. They designed it that way. And it will continue to perpetuate in that way. Now, we're going to talk about the data and the infrastructure and some of the slowdowns. We're going to see some slowdowns, and it may be some bubbles burst, but AI is not going away. And so that's why it's important that we learn it, and we learn to use it, because AI actually moved from tech into policy, into our government. And we saw the shift from when AI left Silicon Valley, and we found it smack dab in our politics. So here's where the story leaves the screen and it enters into our government. Because technology money doesn't stay in technology, it moves into policy. And if you remember, we talked about Peter Thiel. He actually became a major backer of J.D. Vance. And Vance's work in venture capital actually bridged that relationship. He was working, I believe, in, and I'm going to butcher this. I know I am. It may be Naraya, Narya capital in Ohio, because he's here. He's from where I am here in Ohio. And Thiel, his money actually supported Vance's rise. So when you think about the significance of what this venture capital means, and how brilliant these tech bros, PayPal mafia, whatever they want to be called at this point, their framework was for building an exit, and then let's go and invest in the next great thing. Because that laid the groundwork for them integrating and embedding into our politics. I was reading something in the Washington Post as I was trying to gather my notes for this session, and it reported that J.D. Vance actually co-founded Naraya Capital. He co-founded this in 2019 with Colin Greenspan. and he was actually a colleague from Thiel's organization, Mithril. And so at least 15% of the starting capital that was needed to start up JD Vance's company came from Theo. So they had already brokered and built that relationship. And you can say that as a result of that PayPal payout, he had the capital to invest. And so they also say, and I found this interesting, that Theo donated $15 million to a super PAC supporting Vance's Senate campaign. So they were thick even before he got connected with Trump. And they said David Sachs donated $900,000. Lord, where is this money? Can I get some of it? So, in this one, I heard that they said that Vance's selection as Trump's VP pick was a moment where Silicon Valley conservative landed a tech bro on the ticket. So they needed JD Vance in position to further execute their plan. You know, we looking at what's the Project 2025, and these tech bros got a master plan that is so subtle, it's so quietly orchestrated. It reminds me of carbon monoxide. By the time you know it's there, it's too late. And so the reason that I bring this up is because I want us to understand that it's not just about apps. It's about who writes the rules. It's about who shapes the regulation, who influences AI policy, that crypto policy that we keep hearing about, defense policy, labor policy, education policy. So to me, I don't want to necessarily talk about politics in an AI class, right? But I just want us to understand the connection. I want us to understand the threads, because AI, it wasn't shaped just by engineers. And in the future, it won't be shaped by engineers, by IT. It's going to be shaped by law. It's going to be shaped by money. It's going to be shaped by policy and power. And in order for us to see the full picture, we have to understand this. We have to know AI is quickly becoming a utility in our society. I'm talking about all across the world. It's not just going to stop here in the United States. So we got to understand the logic behind the engine. We got to understand who are the power players. We got to understand what is the agenda, what is the objective. And the reason that I say that is not to scare us, not even to invoke any type of strong action, other than learn to use the tool to your advantage. Many of us are left behind. I was just having this conversation the other day. Because I've been in the IT industry for over the last 20 years, I feel like our community, and when I say our community, I mean the community of African Americans primarily, but more specifically minorities, our community was somewhat left behind. We had a fear of the unknown. We decided to opt out of the progression of the information technology and where it was going. I saw that with green technology. Now I'm seeing the same thing with AI. And if I don't help you understand anything, I want to bring AI to a place where you understand that it is not something that will consume you or conquer you. It is something that you helped create. And so because of that, it's not something that you should be afraid of. Now, when we get into the discussion about the data and the infrastructure and stuff like that, you may say, I'm not embracing this because what I'm going to get out of it. But at that point, let's have the discussion. But I just don't like when I hear people say, I'm not going to use that, and like I said, especially in the Christian circle, oh, that's the devil. That's demonic. Those the fallen angels. No, it's not. It's a lot of data and information that over years, a few generations of them capturing data and capturing information. But I won't go down there. I just wanted to help you understand the full thread of how AI came to be within these last two segments that I did. I really wanted to bring that home. And going back, just kind of a recap, it started at Stanford University with the Stanford Review. And that gave us that early relationship network, which, by the way, man, oh man, if I could have been in the room for multiple reasons, but more so to get them to get along, because we go further when we get along, when we come together. Listen, and I'm going to take a few seconds to say this because it's on my mind, but these people have become so engrossed in their own agendas that they forgot about the core of the mission. And I believe that what they set out to do originally is something that our society could use, something that would enhance humanity. But baby, when those egos get into play and all of that conflict, and then they start doing stuff in these organizations that's illegal, that will potentially expose them to possible jail time or something else that will constrain them from being able to lead based on their original objectives. It doesn't benefit anybody. So I wish I was in that room. But anyway, what was I doing? Showing, bringing together the full thread. All right, Stanford gave us the early relationship network, right? Through the Stanford Review and those relationships that were built. PayPal gave us the battlefield, right? Even though I don't like how the conflict ensued, I don't like how they battled against each other because, like I said, that demon, that stronghold, oops, this is the wrong course. But that thing is rearing its head again as we're, cycling through OpenAI. But it gave us the battlefield. It taught them how to debate. It taught them how to leverage brilliance and good ideals out of the conversations, as hard as they may have been. Okay. The PayPal exit gave them the money. Venture capital gave them power to choose the next builder. They making the decisions. Before, they needed investors to help them to even get to the phase of building. Once they built and then they exited, they got the funding that they needed, and they were able to invest the capital that they had acquired into other ventures, okay? And then their companies reshaped the internet. Internet looks nothing like it used to, right? Before they put their plan into motion. OpenAI brought us the network. or brought the network into artificial intelligence. So OpenAI is the arm that helped to bring the network that they had built into artificial intelligence. And Microsoft helped to turn AI into a workplace infrastructure. Politics brought the whole thing into policy. And that's the thread. That's the thread. Once you see it, you cannot unsee it. AI is not just technology. It's relationships, capital, data, infrastructure, products, politics, and power. All right? All right, so let me bring it back to us, because that's what matters to me, right? The point is not to make you feel small, to not make you feel less than, okay? The point is to make you aware. Because when you understand the system, you stop standing outside of it confused. You begin asking better questions. You ask questions like, who owns the tool? Who trained the model? Who benefits from the data? Who gets funded? Who gets hired? Who gets automated? Who gets left out? And then you ask the most important question: how do I use this strategically without being used blindly? And that's where we are. That's where we are. We need to understand what we're working with and what we're dealing with. And AI is not the boogeyman, okay? It's a tool. And we're going to learn how to use this tool, and we're going to continue to leverage it, and we're going to do what it do, just like we do with everything else. We're going to take what they started, and we're going to take it further and beyond what they ever even imagined. All right, so let us get into the next phase and the next topic. I believe next we're going to talk about the data, the infrastructure, and all the juiciness that's going on today. All right.